This video was made possible by Skillshare, an online learning.
What's good, fam? Teacher Eddie back with another reaction. This time we're doing Cold War Part 2, Oversimplified. We're doing it live. So this way I don't have to do it with an overlay over the video, because Oversimplified, I don't know, doesn't like me for some reason, and I always have an issue when I upload videos. But in either case, so Part 1 is on my channel. If you haven't seen it, it's up there. But let's get started.
Anyone who thinks recent US history has never been as crazy as it is right now, allow me to present to you the 1960s, extreme cultural division, major political assassinations, and the closest the world has ever come to nuclear apocalypse. Shocked by the CIA's intrusive methods for putting down socialism in Latin America, a certain Fidel Castro met with a certain Che Guevara in a bar in Mexico City, and the two of them decided they should grow some awesome beards and overthrow the Cuban government, which is exactly what they did. Cuba had been America's summer playground, and America didn't like seeing a communist—
Oh, that's true. Not just America's summer playground. Cuba was the mafia's summer playground as well. Castro famously overthrows Batista in 1959, and then goes on to rule for what felt like forever. The man lived through Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush, pretty much everywhere. Clinton, Bush too. This was the start of many different conflicts and a battered relationship between Cuba and America, of course, but also the first big and probably the biggest strike of actually getting to a war within the Cold War
regime being set up in its own backyard. So the US immediately began training up Cuban exiles to invade Cuba and overthrow Castro. However, as the day of the operation came closer, Kennedy wanted to conceal any US involvement in the plan, so he massively scaled back American air support, and as a result—
Yeah, so that's somewhat correct. But again, it's oversimplified, right? So the point of me reacting to this and analyzing this is to kind of beef it up a bit. So America had a huge influence on Cuba, and it had huge business interests there. Not just the mob, but, you know, I mean, huge American corporations had a lot of interest in Cuba, whether it be, you know, entertainment, whether it be steel and various other industries. And basically when Castro took everything over, he out-mobbed the mob. He kicked everybody out. All American business interests, all mob interests with casinos and hotels and everything. Castro said he was like Killmonger in Black Panther. He was like, "Don't worry about that. I'm gonna take that off your hands. Don't worry about it." So the Bay of Pigs invasion was actually a remnant from the end of the Eisenhower administration. So Eisenhower was the one who actually approved the Bay of Pigs invasion, as well as the training of former Cubans who had come over to America after the Castro Revolution, when Batista gets overthrown, which was on New Year's of all days as well. Happy New Year's, y'all. Guess there's a new sheriff in town, and his name is Fidel Castro. And so basically Kennedy kind of inherits the Bay of Pigs invasion, but he was not all for it. And yeah, at the last second, he basically did screw over the guerrillas, so to speak, in the Bay of Pigs invasion. And it's called the Bay of Pigs invasion because the bay where they began the invasion was literally called the Bay of Pigs in Cuba. So it wasn't like a code name for some operation or anything, which is what a lot of people think. The bay was literally called the Bay of Pigs. And Kennedy kind of got past this by taking full blame for it, which is basically what he did. He took the full brunt of it. He took all the blame for the failure and kind of moved on. But of course, this was the first of what would become many attempts to not just overthrow Castro, but assassinate Castro. My favorite one was when they started playing around with the idea of exploding cigars, which is kind of something like literally either out of Rocky and Bullwinkle or like one of those 80s, movies where the Soviets are the bad guys, which was pretty much every 80s movie. But yeah, so that was true. Kennedy did pull back most of the air support, and due to that, they were just defeated easily. It was like the dream team in the Olympics.
Result, the Bay of Pigs invasion was a humiliating defeat for America. But Castro felt there was still an impending US threat to his regime. Meanwhile, in the Soviet Union, Khrushchev had a lot of medium-range nuclear missiles that couldn't reach America, but they could if they were positioned, say, on an exotic Caribbean island off the coast of Florida. Hey, I'm a communist who hates America. You're a communist who hates America. You know what that means? We should fall in love. I was just gonna suggest you set your missiles up in Cuba. Oh, no, you're right. That's a better idea. Be still, my beating heart. On October 14th, 1962, a YouTube...
Oh my God, I love Oversimplified. Another huge myth that I see a lot of times, and I see on the internet all the time, and I've seen it even on some YouTube videos, was that America could have prevented Cuba going communist if only there's this huge myth that Castro had a tryout with Major League Baseball teams, and he was rejected. So it's kind of like that, if Hitler succeeded in art school, there would be no World War II, right? So that's a huge myth that goes around, that Castro hated America because he couldn't get into Major League Baseball. That is a complete falsehood. He never had any tryout with any major league teams or anything like that. That is all poppycock.
Two spy plane over Cuba noticed something strange. Sir, you need to look at this photograph. You're right. That's the cutest dog I've ever seen. Sir, I was referring more to the Soviet missiles. America freaked out as they realized what was going on. They were completely vulnerable, and they had to act fast. They knew that airstrikes or an invasion of Cuba would likely mean nuclear war with the Soviet Union. So Kennedy came up with another idea, a blockade. The US Navy announced it would stop and search any Soviet ships heading to Cuba, and would sink any that did not comply. In response, the Soviet put its military into full combat readiness. The US did the same, and began...
Yeah, so again, they're going really quick through, but again, the whole conflict itself was really 2 weeks, but probably the most tense 2 weeks you could imagine. So the blockade is what eventually became the no trade relation with Cuba, which is why Cuban cigars became illegal for decades and decades, and there was no exchanges between Cuba and America, was literally because the blockade was never lifted after 1962. And Kennedy was put under tremendous pressure by pretty much everybody, with the exception of his Secretary of Defense, Robert S. McNamara, one of the greatest Secretary of Defenses we've ever had, and one of the most level-headed people that you would want in that type of position. Of course, his brother Bobby Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, who was Attorney General at the time, and very few people in his cabinet. Everyone else pretty much was pressuring Kennedy to go to war with Russia. They felt this was the opportune time, that Russia was the aggressor, even though what America faulted the Soviet Union with was actually exactly what America did to the Soviet Union when America placed the missiles in Turkey. And the Soviet Union said, whoa, hey, that's way too, you're getting way too close, man. You're getting way too close, America. Personal space. Ever heard of it? Respect the personal boundaries over here. You're getting way too close, man. And America was like, oh, well, too bad. But then when Khrushchev did the same thing, America was like, yo, man, that's illegal, man. You can't be doing that. What's wrong with you? Personal space. Ever heard of it? They were like, bro, legit. That's we just mentioned that in Turkey. Remember? And the U.S. was like, I don't know what you're talking about. The U.S. basically gaslighted the Soviet Union. So again, we get taught, of course, the American point of view. And that the Soviet Union were the aggressors by placing the missiles into Cuba. But legit, America did the same thing by placing the missiles in Turkey. And spoilers, by removing the missiles out of Turkey, the conflict was squashed. So it wasn't like the Soviet Union was unprovoked into doing this. So I just wanted to clear that up because again, I'm not trying to toe any lines here and teach you history like the history books teach and national pride and everything. I'm just here to give you the truth of the matter.
Began drawing up plans for an attack on Cuba. Things were escalating fast, and both superpowers were getting ready for World War III. Emergency communications between the two sides broke down as Khrushchev rejected Kennedy's demands for the missiles.
That is true. That's a fact. Khrushchev definitely farted in the phone. You know what? I would not be surprised. Khrushchev was one of the funniest dudes. I mean, was he a great leader? Was he a bad leader? Neither. Right? He wasn't great, but he wasn't terrible. But the one thing was, it was like putting your uncle, like your drunk, funny uncle in charge of shit, right? And you know it's gonna be the bomb, right? Because Uncle Khrushchev is going to let you get away with everything. Khrushchev would make like the worst like jokes, like dad type jokes. My favorites were during the space race when he said, "Aren't you worried that the Americans are getting too close to being able to land a man on the moon?" And Khrushchev was like, "I don't care about the moon. We're going to land a man on the sun." They're like, "How you going to land a man on the sun, Nikita?" He's like, "Shh, we're going to go at night." He would do stuff like that all the time. So absolutely just a very interesting figure who kind of gets forgotten because of this incident in particular. So the communications actually were going well at first, but there's speculation that Khrushchev was not exactly overthrown at the time, but he was kind of removed from the communication process because the tone of the communications changed very quickly, very quickly. Let me check in the chat here. I just saw historical gaslighting. Exactly, Robin. Izuku, stopping every 5 seconds. That's the whole point of a reaction. You want to do a watch along with somebody who doesn't know what the fuck is going on. Why don't you fuck off and watch one of those, or go and watch the original, but don't bitch at me that I'm stopping and explaining things as a history teacher, which is the literal title of this fucking video. So the communications broke down, but then Bobby Kennedy was extremely influential, as well as McNamara, in backdoor channeling. And basically that's how they came to the agreement to remove the missiles out of Turkey. Khrushchev was all for it. Khrushchev was very diplomatic about it. But just like Kennedy was battling his generals and the Joint Chiefs of Staff and everybody else, so was Khrushchev, but except Khrushchev lived in the Soviet Union, so it was kind of easy to shut him down.
be removed. And for the first time in history, US Strategic Air Command moved to DEFCON 2. DEFCON 1 means nuclear war. The Soviets shot down a U-2 spy plane over Cuba. A Soviet nuclear submarine in the Caribbean mistakenly believed war had already broken out, and 2 of the senior officers gave the go-ahead to fire its nuclear torpedo. Thankfully, the 3rd senior officer, this beautiful man, refused to authorize the decision. The US finalized its preparations, and I kid you not, the day before the US were set to decide the day and time for the Cuban invasion, Khrushchev was like, "Hey, you know if you just removed your missiles from Turkey, we'd remove ours from Cuba?" Yeah, that sounds good to me. It was a bit more complicated than that, but at the last second, the 2 sides...
But yeah, let's go back to the real hero here, because they kind of like went...
This
beautiful man, I agree. This beautiful man, I mean, worship whatever celebrities and heroes you want, but Vasily Arkhipov, это просто нельзя объяснить, какой это был просто, не просто красивый мужчина, но это был герой-мужчина. So that was my little Russian spiel there. He is a hero. This man literally stopped nuclear war. I cannot emphasize how close it was. You know, there is no like war room like in Dr. Strangelove, but there are strategic rooms, of course. And Robert S. McNamara was in the strategic room when this was going down. And the ships were at a standstill. And McNamara, again, was being forced by the Joint Chiefs of Staff to fire at the vessel. And McNamara read it perfectly that this was a standoff. And Vasily Arkhipov was just, thank God you had those 2 men in that situation. McNamara and Arkhipov, just no way that we can ever thank these men enough. No way we can ever thank these men enough. These men are literal heroes who saved the world. So they just kind of jumped over that. But I really, really, really want to emphasize this point, because unfortunately, you know, we as a society, not to get all Joker on you, we celebrate the wrong types of people most times. These are the people we need to celebrate. Actual heroes. And plus, he is a handsome fuck, man. Look at that face.
Beautiful man refused to authorize the decision. The US finalized its preparations, and I kid you not, the day before the US were set to decide the day and time for the Cuban invasion, Khrushchev was...
No. Okay, so I'm gonna debunk that real quick. Yes, there were plans, but Kennedy was doing it more as an appeasement to all the military people that were surrounding him within his cabinet, within the planning and everything else. Kennedy was no way going to invade Cuba. No way was he going to invade Cuba. I am 100% sure he never, ever would have invaded Cuba. It was more a stalling tactic so he could do the real work. He's like, yeah, go ahead. Go, go plan that. Yeah, exactly, man. Go play and plan while we do the real work, right?
Like, hey, you know if you just removed your missiles from Turkey, we'd remove ours from Cuba? Yeah, that sounds good to me. It was a bit more complicated than that, but at the last second, the 2 sides finally came to an agreement. Soviet missiles were shipped out of Cuba, and the world breathed one gigantic sigh of relief. Except for one guy, who was bloody livid. Phew! Let's hope that's the biggest crisis of my presidency. Unfortunately for him, his presidency was to end...
Miro provides an...
Really? You're gonna cut to a commercial at that? That's what you're gonna do.
infinite canvas for cross-functional teams to collaborate without constraints.
That ain't right. That ain't right.
Presidency. Unfortunately for him, his presidency was to end with one.
Oh, man. Wait. Who the hell was that in the background?
Unfortunately for him,
who the hell is that? Man, I can't even like make out. Is that like Bernie? Well, I see like the dude on the grassy knoll. But, yo, chat, help me out. Who is that? I can't see. It's way too tiny.
His presidency was to end with one. having nearly blown up the planet, a few changes were made. First, the superpowers agreed to a limited test ban treaty. Secondly, the Soviets ousted Khrushchev and replaced him with Leonid Brezhnev.
Yes. So this was a major... The Soviets saw this as a huge failure, okay? Because the Soviets, not talking about the Soviet people, of course, I'm talking about the Soviet government. The Soviet government saw this as a huge failure on Khrushchev's part. The famous "you blinked first," because they equated it to a stare down. Like this was the peak of the Cold War. And they say during the stare down, Khrushchev blinked first and gave in to Kennedy. So that was basically the end of the end for Khrushchev. And then comes in Brezhnev with the sexiest pair of eyebrows this side of Martin Scorsese.
Who was a kisser. He liked to kiss. Both sides were deeply concerned at the prospect of nuclear war, but still, the arms race raged on throughout the 60s and 70s. US intelligence worked out that the Soviets' nuclear arsenal was not as powerful as they previously thought, but in fact, it was America that held the advantage. ABMs and MIRVs were developed, and the doctrine of MAD. If both sides knew they would be completely destroyed by a nuclear war, neither would risk starting one. But even without war.
And this was the basis. Also, the interesting thing is, just a kind of suggestion. So in 1962, as this is happening, two movies come out that year. The one that most of you have probably heard of is Dr. Strangelove, directed by Stanley Kubrick, starring Peter Sellers, George C. Scott, Sterling Hayden. Just an amazing movie. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's a dark comedy which basically parodies what happens if there are no fail-safes in a nuclear war with the Cold War happening. So I'm not going to give away the plot, but it is an amazing movie. The second movie that comes out at this time with the same exact plot, but a more serious tone movie, was called Fail-Safe, starring Henry Fonda and Walter Matthau. So it's basically the polar opposite of Dr. Strangelove. It's not as brilliant a movie because, again, Kubrick, but it is a great movie that I highly recommend you watch if you haven't seen it. And it's amazing that the movies came out as this was happening, which is just insane. Like, talk about foreshadowing.
The world was already feeling the effects of nuclear weapons. In 1966, above the pleasant town of Palomares in Spain, a US bomber collided with a tanker mid-air, and 4 hydrogen bombs fell and landed near the town below. It hasn't exploded, so I'm sure everything's fine. Whoa, boy. Hey, I wouldn't eat that if I were you. Okay. What were you gonna do today? Go for a swim? Yeah, I wouldn't. Are you breathing right now? Yeah? Yeah. I wouldn't. It took the Americans 2.5 months to find one of the bombs, which had gone missing in the ocean. This was the 14th time America had lost a nuclear bomb since 1950. Nobody knows how many bombs the Soviet Union lost. So sleep well tonight. After Kennedy's assassination, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson took over, and he inherited a developing crisis in the East, Vietnam. Back in the 50s, the Vietnamese had kicked their French colonizers out once and for all, and the country was divided into two. In the north, a communist regime, and in the south, an anti-communist regime. Both were led by very sweet-looking old men, but don't let that deceive you. They were...
I don't think Ho Chi Minh is a very sweet-looking old man. Ho Chi Minh looks like every Asian bad guy in every American movie. But yes, well, let's get into Johnson's role in Vietnam.
Were both ruthless dictators, and both dreamed of reuniting Vietnam under their own regime. So the North established the National Liberation Front, also known as the Viet Cong, to carry out a campaign of guerrilla warfare in the South with Soviet support. The US sent advisors to help train the South Vietnamese to deal with the threat, but President Diem's brutal policies pushed...
Yeah, so the advisors, that was during the Eisenhower administration and the Kennedy administration. The advisors.
More and more South Vietnamese to support the Viet Cong, and over the next decade, the situation escalated to a breaking point. America feared the domino effect. That is, if South Vietnam fell to communism, would Cambodia be next? Then Laos? Thailand? Burma? India? LBJ had to make a choice between losing South Vietnam or sending in the troops, and so in they went. From 1965, America found itself in a war unlike anything it had ever fought before.
All right, so they skipped over the big point. So the war, like a lot of wars, was started on a lie. So they put here in 1965.
Losing South Vietnam or sending in the troops. And so
1965, American troops arrive in Vietnam. So the key point here is 1964, though. So 1964, which would have been Kennedy's last year in office before the upcoming elections, there were several incidents, but the Gulf of Tonkin incident was what really spearheaded the decision to go into war. But unfortunately, that was all based on a lie. So the Gulf of Tonkin incident, I won't go into great detail because, again, this is going to turn into a forever video. But definitely wiki it, Google it, whatever. But basically, the Gulf of Tonkin incident was, I think, the third incident where submarines detected Soviet activities, so to speak, when all of it was a lie. The sonars were picking up, in most cases, I know it's funny, but it's not funny at the same time, whale farts. Whale farts. So they were detected as Soviet aggression towards America in the Vietnam conflict, when the Soviets were like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, right? So it was all based, unfortunately, on a lie, right? And that was the justification for sending in troops in 1965.
in they went. From 1965, America found itself in a war unlike anything it had ever fought before. Let's play Spot the Viet Cong Soldier. Did you see him? Of course not. That's because millions of young American men were drafted and sent to fight a ruthless enemy who used the thick jungle as its shield. It was nearly impossible to tell where the enemy was, or worse, who it was. And as a result, the civilian population got caught up in the brutal crossfire. The city of Saigon found itself under regular attack, and America launched a bombing campaign in the north during Operation Rolling Thunder. The Viet Cong used the Ho Chi Minh Trail running through Laos and Cambodia to supply the campaign. It was a long and brutal war, and I could never do it justice in this video. But in terms of the Cold War, Vietnam was probably the biggest of many global conflicts that signaled a turning point. Under the threat of nuclear war, the two superpowers began working to make their relationship more constructive, and as a result, their ideological battle shifted away from the potential of direct conflict and more towards attempting to influence smaller proxy wars around the world. In the Middle East, the Soviet Union provided aid against Israel during the Six-Day War, and then again when the US backed Israel during the Yom Kippur War. In Africa, the Angolan Civil War saw US-supported South Africans fighting Soviet-supported Cubans. In the conflict between Somalia and Ethiopia, the superpowers interestingly switched sides.
I was just about to say.
And the US continued fighting the spread of communism in its own backyard, funding the famous Contra groups to fight the socialist junta in Nicaragua.
Yeah, they're kind of jumping all over the place. They're going from like the 70s to the 60s to the 80s. So yeah, there were a bunch of these, what they perfectly call micro wars, basically. And the other point I wanted to make, about Vietnam is, really, Vietnam could have ended probably 3 or 4 years earlier. Basically, Nixon brings an end to the war, but under the same terms that were offered several years prior. So again, the entire Vietnam conflict was just terrible, unnecessary, and one of America's greatest blunders of the 20th century.
These proxy wars were fierce enough to begin with, but superpower intervention amplified the destruction and created alarming levels of human suffering throughout the Third World. And in Vietnam, that human suffering was all being broadcast back home via good old television. Going into the late 60s, America was a changing nation. This became this. This became this. And this became this. The new slogan that was taking root: make love, not war. The majority of Americans did not approve of jargon that was taking root.
I caught
make
that.
Love, not war.
Forrest Gump in the background screaming for Jenny. Jenny! Jenny. By the way, I still stand by it. Jenny from Forrest Gump, the greatest movie villain of all time. Jenny had, I mean, Darth Vader, Hannibal Lecter, whoever you want to talk about, Jenny from Forrest Gump, the greatest villain of all time.
The majority of Americans did not approve of Johnson's handling of the Vietnam War, and in 1968, a silent majority elected Law and Order candidate Richard.
Oh, not only did, I don't want silent majority, it was a very vocal majority. It was so bad that the reason Nixon won is because Johnson refused to run. Johnson wanted nothing to do with being president anymore. That's how entangled and foobar the Vietnam War was. Johnson went on television and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I will not accept, nor will I run to be your president again." Dropped the mic and was like, "Deuces, y'all." And Nixon snuck back in to get his revenge for the 1960 election, and he was overwhelming. His second run for president was one of the biggest landslides in history. It is a huge misconception that at the time Nixon was not, not liked and everything. Nixon had one of the biggest landslide victories ever. The only ones that were bigger were Reagan Mondale, and pretty much FDR and whatever timber he was running against.
Richard Nixon. As the Vietnam War appeared to be increasingly unwinnable and public opinion turning increasingly sour, Nixon made the decision to begin bringing the troops home and ended U.S. involvement in Vietnam by 1973. 2 years later, the South fell.
Yeah.
The Cold War was now taking its toll on both superpowers. In Russia, a huge percentage of the budget was still going to the military. People were still hungry, and they just didn't have access to the same lifestyle and goods as the West. And what did they have to show for it? They weren't even winning the space race anymore. Both sides needed to reduce spending in order to rescue their economies, and so both welcomed with open arms an easing of hostilities, otherwise known as détente. To improve relations, Nixon became the first U.S. president to visit Moscow in 1972, and Brezhnev returned the gesture a year later. A number of treaties were signed, including the 1972 SALT Agreement that limited nuclear weapons. Relations with China were even improving via ping-pong diplomacy when the U.S. table tennis team went on a tour of the People's Republic. However, internally, China was still pushing anti-capitalist propaganda, which led to some mixed messages. Nixon even visited China in 1972, and it was a barrel of laughs.
Today, the president walks among priceless treasures from China's golden age. Among them, a pair of ear stoppers used by the emperor to keep from hearing criticism.
That is amazing. Oh my God.
To keep from hearing criticism.
That is amazing.
Yes, so that he couldn't hear the criticism.
Give me a pair.
I mean, again, I know Nixon gets a lot of flack, and when I did the presidential rankings and everything else, people didn't agree with my take on Nixon. But yes, Nixon should have resigned. Nixon should have been impeached for what he did with Watergate, absolutely. But it's so unfortunate because prior to that, he was actually a great president. His diplomacy skills were really second to none. I mean, it's hard to explain the significant impact into worldwide relations with Nixon meeting with Mao Zedong when he visited China and opening up those communications and opening up communications with the Soviet Union. Nixon was a master politician, a master manipulator as well, of course, but a master diplomat, master politician, along with, of course, Henry Kissinger, his diplomacy skills and knowledge is pretty much unmatched. And it's just such a shame that Nixon self-sabotaged himself to what I feel he definitely had some either form of schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. The man was extremely paranoid. Extremely paranoid. But he was very personable.
Everything was going great for Nixon, until it was uncovered that back home he was being a very naughty boy and violating constitutional protocol. I'm announcing today my resignation as president, and I'm passing the office to my vice president, Gerald Ford. Wow, you mean in America that people can actually remove their leader when he breaks the law? Why not just rule by force? Where's the corruption? And my first act as president is to pardon Nixon. There it is. After the whole fiasco, Americans decided what they really wanted was just a nice, safe guy who wouldn't cheat on them. So they elected Jimmy Carter, and the two sides met in Vienna where they signed yet another strategic arms limitation treaty. It's an honor, Premier Brezhnev. Likewise, President Carter. Please don't do that. But that's not to say there was no longer any tension between the two sides, because there was. Heaps of it. Once again, the Soviet Union put down further attempts at reform and rebellion in the Eastern Bloc. The Euro missile crisis saw new and improved classes of intermediate-range missiles being deployed in Europe. In 1979, the Soviets thought it would be a good idea if they had their own Vietnam and invaded Afghanistan to prevent a US-sponsored Islamic insurgency. And in response to these various crises, Olympic Games were boycotted. Conservatives were concerned that US policy...
Yeah, I think that was one of the big reasons why Jimmy Carter was not reelected. It was a bad idea to cancel the Olympic Games. But also, of course, I don't think Carter got a fair shake, especially having to follow not just Nixon, but Ford was a very unpopular president. And the fact that the first thing he did was pardon Nixon. Ford had no chance of being reelected. Well, then again, Ford was never elected, right? That's one of the fun history tidbits, if you don't know. Gerald Ford is the only unelected president we've ever had. And so Carter easily defeated him. But Carter just never really got a fair shake. He inherited so much crap. And he inherited just a terrible economy at the time, the oil shortage, the terrorist hijackings. It wasn't good for Carter, man.
Had become too soft, and in 1980 they decided they wanted a president who would be tough on communism, so they elected Ronald Reagan, and Reagan came in guns blazing. Concerned at the Soviet Union's human rights violations, he made a speech calling them an evil empire, and he also wanted to renew the arms race using technological advances in computing and lasers. He came up with the Space Defense Initiative, also known as Star Wars, which was basically a big defensive anti-nuke shield around the country, but a lot of people thought it was a pretty dumb idea. The Soviet Union perceived this
Oh no, not a lot of people thought it was a pretty dumb idea. Most people thought it was a pretty dumb idea. And there was no proof it would actually work. And they sunk a crap ton of money into it. And Reagan apologists will always say that, no, this helped bring down the Soviet Union and helped end the Cold War. Because the Soviet Union, they bankrupted themselves trying to create their own and prevent nonsense. Absolute nonsense. The whole Reagan worship, again, I know a lot of people worship Reagan, but I know, as I say it jokingly, of course, but I always say Rocky Balboa and Rocky Ford did more to bring down communism than Ronald Reagan ever did. There were so many other people who actually did help end the Cold War. Chernobyl helped bring down the Soviet Union more than anything Reagan did. Gorbachev did more than Reagan ever did.
Shift in rhetoric as the USA getting ready for war, and they were feeling especially threatened as their relationship with their communist ally China had broken down. Relations took a big hit in 1983 when the Soviets shot down a Korean airliner that had strayed into their airspace, and it looked like the world was going right back to mid-20th century Cold War tension. But then Brezhnev got really old and died, and was replaced by this guy who was really old and died, and was replaced by this guy who was really old and died, and he was replaced by Mikhail Gorbachev, coming into office in 1980.
Yeah, between the early 80s, it was very, very unstable, and until Gorbachev comes in 1985. Extremely unstable.
1985, he was the real game changer.
Pizza or salad? Which one do you think I'm having for dinner tonight? Well,
don't give a
it's not
fuck.
this.
His philosophy differed a lot from previous Soviet leaders. He felt that the reason the Soviet system and economy was struggling was that it didn't allow the Soviet people to find satisfaction in their work, because they weren't allowed to speak freely and lived in fear. Gorbachev wanted the Soviet people to be happy, but unlike previous Soviet leaders, he actually made the change happen. Within the first couple of years, he began the political movement for more openness and transparency, and the restructuring.
Yeah, glasnost, openness and most Americans say perestroika, but it's perestroika. Perestroika, which means actually not as much restructuring as rebuilding. Perestroika.
Structuring of the Soviet political and economic systems, and change very quickly took effect. People could criticize the government, they could enjoy Western pop culture, the media interviewed Margaret Thatcher, but most importantly, the Soviet people could now enjoy Pizza Hut. All hail to Gorbachev.
Oh my God, if you haven't seen it, Gorbachev actually did a Pizza Hut commercial. It is one of the best things ever. You can find it on YouTube. Gorbachev's Pizza Hut commercial is off the chains, just hilarious. You have to watch it. But I remember the biggest deal was McDonald's. Now, when McDonald's opened, because we would have an influx of different like friends and relatives coming to visit us from Russia or Ukraine. And I was always amazed because I didn't understand as a kid. I mean, we're talking about the 80s, right? So in the 80s, as a kid, 6, 7, 8 years old, I really didn't understand what they were really going through there. And I didn't understand why they were so excited when they would see like t-shirts with print on them. When they would see, posters, like, because they didn't have all these things there. But the biggest thing was the food. When McDonald's first opened up in Russia, the lines were like, I don't even know, man, like Coachella, Star Wars premieres, all that shit combined. And people were so, like, it was a sign of prestige to, like, display, to show people, like, yo, I went to McDonald's. They would display, like, their napkins from McDonald's. Like, they would hoard those treasures, the ketchup packets, everything. That shit was like currency, son. That was like cigarettes in prison. Like, it was insane. But then, of course, later on, I understood why, because they just didn't have this stuff. They would come here, and VCRs, like, were such a huge deal. Like, all the things that we took for granted to them was like, oh my God, like, you actually can buy this stuff? Crazy talk.
He also knew that the arms race needed to end in order to rescue the Soviet economy, and a positive relationship with the West must be established. Constructive dialogue reopened and resulted in the INF Treaty, which saw all intermediate-range missiles eliminated, which was huge. Reagan's tone towards the Soviet Union began to soften, and things were looking up. But what would these reforms mean for the Eastern Bloc? For decades, the Soviets had been brutally suppressing any attempt at change. Now, would they be allowed? And that was the exact question on Hungary's lips when the Prime Minister visited Moscow. Gorbachev's response: he didn't necessarily agree with the reforms, but he wouldn't stop them either. He was prepared to let the Eastern Bloc choose its own future. This was massive, and the Hungarian leaders began planning free, multi-party elections.
Yeah, 1989 was a huge
and also
year.
held elections in June. The anti-Soviet party, Solidarity, won 99 out of 100 seats in the Senate. But not just that. In Hungary, the barbed wire border between East and West was removed. The Iron Curtain was unraveling. But not all Eastern Bloc leaders were happy. Notably, East Germany was still ruled by a hardline Stalinist, Erich Honecker, and many East Germans were still eager to get out. They had been trapped by the Berlin Wall, but now they were doing the math. If they could travel to Hungary, and Hungary's border with the West was loosening, could they now make it to the West? That summer, East Germans decided Hungary was the latest top holiday destination. They traveled there in droves, and using various methods, tens of thousands crossed the border into Austria and the West. Honecker was furious, and blocked travel to Hungary, but that civil liberties train had started rolling, and it wasn't stopping. Thousands more flocked to the West German embassy in Prague, where they stormed the fence.
Yeah. I was going to make a Germany and train joke there, but you know what? I'm going to hold back on that. But he was furious. I bet he did not see that coming. Okay, I got to
around the embassy gardens, and a temporary refugee camp was set up. In
just
September,
fun.
deals were struck to allow the refugees to travel west via train. Back in East Germany, the people were running on a civil liberties high, and they wanted their next hit. Dissent was growing. Over time, demonstrations turned to mass protest, with plainclothes secret police officers doing their best to put down the dissent, but it had grown well out of their control. And worse, the biggest demonstration was yet to come. We're gonna put all of this down by force. Right, guys? Guys? Unfortunately, everyone had realized what he had not. This was bigger than them, and the entire East German Politburo voted him out of power. On November 4th, over 500,000 East Germans took to the streets of East Berlin. For many, there was still one big target left in their sights. That damn wall. The pressure on the East German government was too great, and on November 9th, they made a bit of a chaotic announcement that the travel ban between East and West was being lifted. The change wasn't meant to take effect until the next day, and crossing guards still had orders to shoot on sight any who tried to cross. But that night, huge crowds gathered at the crossing points, and the guards were overwhelmed. In an astronomically historic moment, after decades of family separation and travel restriction, the people were allowed to pass through. East and West Berliners couldn't believe it and celebrated together throughout the night. Some even
I remember watching this. I remember watching this live on television, and like this is like really just hitting me hard in the field. This was such a big moment. Like, I'm getting goosebumps remembering this. I mean, you know, it's hard for people to understand how big this was because it is history. It's in the past. And, you know, when you're there to see it happen, this was one of those just tear-inducing moments where you were just so happy to finally see something happen. And you felt hopeful again. You know, I can't, that's really what, you know, the main point here, that there was finally hope. The 80s was a rough decade, fam. The 80s was not a good time at all. And a lot of people look back upon the 80s with nostalgia, but they only remember the good parts. The 80s was not a good decade at all on many different fronts, both nationally and internationally. But this moment just gave the world so much hope that good was still out there.
Began to topple it. The Iron Curtain had fallen, and a year later, Germany would be reunited. Elections in Bulgaria, a peaceful revolution in Czechoslovakia, and a violent one in Romania brought to an end communist authority in the Eastern Bloc. America decided it would be best if it just stayed away and let the change happen, as the anti-communist movement continued all the way back to Moscow. Gorbachev had given the people the freedom to demonstrate. Now, they demonstrated for an end to the communist single-party rule, and Gorbachev had to give in. For the first time in history, elections were held in which candidates not officially endorsed by the party were allowed to run. Ambitious rival of Gorbachev, Boris Yeltsin, led a growing democratic movement. Now things here get quite confusing, and the dissolution of the Soviet Union is a complicated topic, so believe me, this is oversimplified, but it went a little bit like this. The Soviet Union was made up of a number of smaller Soviet republics, the largest of which was Russia. Yeltsin got himself elected the president of Russia, and began a struggle for sovereignty against Gorbachev and the Greater Soviet Union. Communist hardliners were horrified at what Gorbachev was allowing, so they briefly kidnapped him and tried to set up their own emergency government. But Yeltsin and his supporters all gathered around the White House in Moscow and were like, This is literally what happened. Yeltsin rode in like what was homeboy, like Hunter Hearst Helmsley on the tank, trying to invade WCW for all my wrestling fans out there. Legit, man. They rode in on tanks. Yeltsin was like Triple H, and they had the whole posse there trying to invade WCW. They kidnapped. I mean, it was just it's so insane what happened, because a lot of people just remember, the Berlin Wall fell and that was it, right? Everything was over. No, man, fam, things went wild, and this is definitely a separate topic I would love to talk about. I can't even start talking about this because there is so much involved in what happened here. No, we have a tank. So the hardliners had to concede and released Gorbachev. Wow, thanks, Boris. That was a close one. No problem. And thanks to you for all the great freedom you've given us. Anytime, pal. And just to inform you, I've used that freedom you've given us to go behind your back and make a deal with Ukraine and Belarus to dissolve the Soviet Union and set up the Russian Federation. In other words, you're no longer in charge. I am. Dude.
Pretty much.
So uncool. And so decades of tension and the everlasting threat of nuclear war finally came to an end as democratic governments were established in many of the old Soviet republics, and the world got along together forever after. Right, guys? Hey, this modern art thing is growing on me. Where can I learn to do that?
All right, I guess that's the end. Again, very fun video. I love Oversimplified. I know I'm probably going to get some kind of notice a couple hours after the live stream's over, but it is what it is. I enjoyed actually doing this one live as well. Let me just take a quick look at the chat here. The Hollow King, what's up, my brother? Thank you so much, and you're absolutely welcome for the message there. Putin, KGB boss, basically. Let's see if there was anything else. I love Cold War history. Reagan is the most overrated president. Yeah, he's in the top there. He's most overrated probably of the 20th century for sure. And definitely you could make the argument that he is the most overrated president. Especially his policies. I mean, I've talked about it in other videos, so I don't want to get into it again. Technically, George Washington won in the biggest... Yeah, okay, you got me there, yes. Because there was no opponent, yes. George Washington is the only president to be unanimously elected. Yeah, so you're right there. FDR ran against Alf Landon. Yeah. Alf Landon was what they called him presidential timber when he ran against FDR. That he was pretty much just there to be chopped down. He was like when you offer up a sacrifice. That's basically what it was, because nobody was beating FDR. Kissing prowess directly related to eyebrow thickness. That's why I have these thick ass, these beautiful eyebrows right up here. I don't know. I never kiss myself. Eddie has deep brain wrinkles. Lots of room for info. That's because Eddie cuts the crap and irons everything out. I appreciate that. A historical hottie. Of course, you're talking about Arkhipov, not about me, but I'm gonna pretend it was about me. How about that? Eddie knows everything. Far from it. Trust me, there's a lot of shit I don't know. Especially trendy ass shit. I had to actually look up what a Chad was today because somebody called me a Chad. I think it's a compliment. Not sure though. And Kin told me about the milk crate challenge. I have no clue what the fuck that's about. As a kid, we just used milk crates as chairs. What's up, Teacher Eddie? I don't know, not much, man. What's up with you? How you doing, fam? I hope you're doing well. Let's see what else. I'm going to take mythology, digital media, AP US history, physics, computer apps, and algebra 2. Damn, Susan. That's a full plate right there. Let's see. All right, I can't catch all these. There's a lot of comments here, but again, fam, I appreciate Chad is a mega compliment. Mega's like huge, like the mega powers back in the day when you had the mega powers, Hulk Hogan and Macho Man. Yo, them's was the mega powers. Chad is definitely a compliment. Well, that's what I figured. You know, it's like, hey, you cool. Yeah, cool. Exactly. Thank you, Hollow King. I'm cool. I'm like, tell Jacob that. Jacob doesn't think I'm cool because I'm an old man. I remember when Jacob was in kindergarten, he had to do an interview. And one of the questions was, how old is your dad? And Jacob wrote down, too old. Too old. Thanks, son. But anyway, how you doing, Teacher Eddie? Like I said, man, it's all good. It's all good. I'm trying to get back in the swing of things. I had a really bad stomach flu for like the past 5-6 days. So that's why I haven't been able to put out much content. But I'm going to get back up on that horse. Definitely trying to do daily content. And my goal is always to try to do 2 videos a day. Because I need that algorithm to start picking up. And, you know, I'd like to make a little money on YouTube. It'd be nice. I ain't looking to be YouTube rich. I ain't looking to be a millionaire. But, you know, covering my bills would be fun. Let's see. Yeah, too old. Yeah, exactly. He had a couple of funny answers on that thing. Oh, what does your dad do for a living? Make money. He ain't wrong, but literally that's what he thought. But my favorite thing was when Jacob was a kid, whenever I'd be like, I'm sorry, baby, we can't get this or whatever because I don't have any money. And he literally thought banks just gave money away for free. And he was like, why don't we just go to the money store and get more money? I'm like, what money store? And he's like, the bank. He thought they just gave money out for free. I was like, man, I wish. That'd be awesome. There's a Hulk Hogan ERB. I've seen it. Yeah, Hulk Hogan versus Kim Jong-il, I think. Yeah, Kim Jong-il, I assume. Not Un, but Il. I think Kim Jong-un would be a much better matchup though, because he definitely looks like kind of looks like King Kong Bundy. Like he definitely looks like he could wrestle. Teacher Eddie, the stomach flu is annoying. I have to deal with this for a month. Yeah, stomach flu is not fun. Does Jacob speak any Russian? No. Jacob just refused to. He understands some words here and there, but not enough to carry any type of conversation. Will you check out more Salmonella? Yeah, absolutely. I love Salmonella. I wish it got more views. But again, I do whatever I enjoy, and I enjoy Oversimplified. ERB is like my everything. My number one favorite thing is ERB. But I absolutely love Salmonella. I'm going to do more Salmonella. But definitely, I just wish they would get more views, especially in comparison to other quote unquote historians and history teachers who do the same types of reactions. I don't know. The algorithm, I don't know how the fuck it works. I just make videos. Like I said, I don't plan these videos. I just choose a video that I enjoy, or think I will enjoy at least, of course. And I just react to it. I don't prepare for it. I don't make any notes. I just hit record, and whatever comes out, comes out. Do I get things wrong sometimes? Probably. But again, I just want to be real, honest, and genuine. Genuine is the biggest thing for me, is being genuine. Like, I think that is the most important trait that one needs to have, not in just being a YouTube creator, but being a person in general. I respect the hell out of people who are straight up genuine, who are real, who say what they mean and mean what they say. Have you ever heard of a PPP loan? Yes, I have. I actually used to work in banking a long ass time ago, back in the late 90s. Is this the end of the direct, or will you see other video? I'm not doing any more reactions. I've been doing it for about an hour now, and I'm starting to get I have a brother which is 12 years old, and he can speak 3 languages: Russian, English, Latvian, and currently is learning Japanese. That's cool. I could speak English, Russian, Yiddish, Brooklyn, and sarcasm. So that's like at least like 3.5 languages. I'm from Germany. Very nice. Yo, nice Captain America shield. Thank you very much. And also the oh, there it is, the life-size Spider-Man behind me. But yeah, the Captain America shield is mad cool. Absolutely. Sometime you should react to Oversimplified Japan. I've done I did the Bill Wirtz one, History of Japan. So I think that might be a little redundant, but I may get to it. I really want to do next Oversimplified Prohibition, because that legit is one of my favorite eras to cover. Like, that is something I have an immense knowledge of, because probably my favorite class to teach in history is it's a college course, and you probably have seen it in your college. U.S. History 1877 to the present. Even though usually we don't get past, I mean, it's very rare you get even up to like 1980. So it's not really to the present. But teaching U.S. History 1877 to the present, my absolute favorite course to teach. Love the course, because I love 20th century history so much. Not as much, I'm talking about, World War II and World War I, all that stuff, but there are so many gems in 20th century history. One of my favorite things is I would spend a whole week just on 20th century advertising, just the birth of advertising and how that worked, and women gaining disposable income and starting to become the targets of the ad industry, and women taking more of a head of household role. Because women's studies was one of my majors for my one of my two masters, the other being race relations. And also, I just love the mafia. Like my knowledge of mafia and mob related history is like definitely like top 10 for me. I'm just absolutely obsessed with the entire history of the mafia in the United States and around the world as well, because it is just such a fascinating topic to me. So I definitely, the next one I'm going to do is prohibition, because again, it's something I enjoy, and I feel if it's something I enjoy, it's going to come out in the video as well, versus doing something I'm not as interested in. So that definitely that's going to be one of the next things I probably do. So at this point, I guess I'm going to wrap it up. I would love to hang out with you guys. I'm definitely also going to try to do more live streams, because I do enjoy doing the live streams, and especially getting that live interaction while I'm doing it. So maybe I'll do a salmonella some point this week. I am going to do the wrestling one. I know I was going to do the wrestling tier list last night, but again, I was just too sick. I just couldn't do it. Plus it was so hot. So the heat, plus the fever, plus the stomach pain, it was just too much. I couldn't do it. So I'm going to do it at some point this week, because it's definitely something I love as well. Big wrestling fan. And of course, with CM Punk coming back after 7 long years, I cried. I cried when Punk came out. When I saw that, I was like, you don't know. I mean, Punk is, I just love CM Punk so much. I'm just so sad that he had to miss those 7 years, because that definitely would have been his prime probably, but I'm just so happy to see him back. So yeah. So anyway, before I start crying about some random ass, thank you guys so much. Thank you for all the support. I love you guys so much. Not paying any attention to all the haters out there who be hating on me for different reasons. I'm taking your guys' advice. I'm only concentrating on the positive people, the people who do support me, because you guys deserve it, because you guys are absolutely amazing. And I don't know how much I can say thank you, but thank you guys so much. I mean, this really means the world to me. The joy you guys bring me, your comments, I mean, everything. Just thank you so much. Yo, Addie, number one, Addie, thank you so much for supporting me on Patreon. And I really appreciated you checking in on me earlier to see how I was doing. Yo, Ryback, legit, feed me more, man. I loved Ryback in WWE, and I love his podcast. Ryback is just such a funny dude. I know CM Punk hated on Ryback, but I love Ryback. You know what? I'm definitely doing that wrestling tier list, and we're going to talk some wrestling, man. So all my wrestling fans out there, please make sure, just keep your eye out. I'll post an announcement. I'll try to do it some point this week. I'm going to be ranking the greatest wrestlers of all time. And when I say all time, I mean all time, right? We're going back to like classy Freddie Blassie. We're going back to the Nature Boy, Buddy Rogers, the first Nature Boy. I'm ranking all of them. I'm ranking them all. I'm styling, profiling. What you talking about, brother, dude? I'll see you next time. Thank you again so much. Love you guys. And I'll see you soon. Fam! And thank you to all the Patreon supporting Teacher Eddies, starting with the Chancellors, Elena G, Caleb, Laura, Phoenix, Blue Tech, Nazvanyu, Douglas, the Principals, Aaron Shepard, Spacey Doodle, Clement, Vijandra, Alan, Alex, King Panda, Freeman, Moody Kakari, Nathan, Chad, Chris, The Boggle, Sophia, Robin, Lord Gandalf, Luna, and Moderately Upset Bro. I've been Teacher Eddie, and I'll see you next